Hello everyone, my name is Annie and I welcome you back on our page. And as you know that we've started a course on UGC NET English exam and we've been putting up many blogs on it, and this is going to be the second video lesson that I am going to put on our page. And the first was the starting of literary theory, and the second lesson that I'm going to put is on the beginning of literary criticism. But before I begin with literary criticism, I request you to please sign in to our page, and also I would request you to keep liking the posts, or at least keep sharing the posts, so that we keep getting motivated to bring out the best as much as we can for you, and so that it is beneficial for you as well as for us. So this is the link of the website that I've just put in. Please come and sign up on this page, become members, and share with us your thoughts, your problems in the forum page that we have in the menu section. So let us begin. This lesson is going to be on Plato. So before I begin talking about Plato, I would just talk a little bit on literary criticism. So what exactly do you mean by criticism? You must have heard this word many times. Even in our day-to-day life, we use this word, like we use criticize, right? And we also use criticism in many of the questions of English literature. So what is criticism? Let us see. Any form of literature, literature can be anything, poetry, drama, fiction, etc. And it can be enjoyed in two ways. First, you can enjoy it as a layman, as um, just as you read the text and you enjoy it without putting any other efforts into it. And second is as a trained person. How do you enjoy a text as a trained person? It is methodically. How? You are not only reading the text for your enjoyment, but you also try and find out some of the things in it. For example, let's say you try and find out uh, the hidden meanings behind it, or you try and find out the form that it has been written in, or you try and find out different uh, devices that have been used in a text, right? So this is how you basically are doing a criticism of a text. Okay, so these are the two methods that you can enjoy the text in. But this latter mode of enjoying it is actually called criticism, that you do it as a trained person in a particular method. Okay? A critique is an ideal reader. To a critique, no work of art is good or bad, enjoyable or unenjoyable, meaningful or meaningless until the work is examined by him or her. Now, important, remember that a critique is always going to be an ideal reader, because first of all, the critique is not reading for just the purpose of enjoying it, right? So for a critique, any work of art, a critique would not just say that the work of art is good, or he would not say that a work of art is bad, enjoyable or unenjoyable, meaningful or meaningless, until and unless he or she has examined it thoroughly. Only then he or she will be able to make a comment like that, or for a text. So that is how criticism is done. There was hardly any critical literature on Bible, but after Renaissance, interrogation was encouraged and it began to be examined critically. Now, back then, when Bible came, at that time there was hardly any critical literature, because Bible would, people would say that it is the word of God, and nobody would want to question the work of God. Correct. So it was orthodox at that time. But after Renaissance came, interrogation and questioning started happening. And this gave encouragement, and finally everything started to be examined thoroughly, even the Bible. So that is when criticism actually began. It was after Renaissance. All right. So this is a brief introduction on criticism, what criticism is actually, and after this we shall begin with Plato. So we'll begin with Plato. The date of birth is generally put down at 427 BC. It is not very sure, nobody knows the exact date when Plato was born, but it is generally put down to 427 BC. And the date of death is certain. He died in 348 BC. All right. Plato was a disciple of Socrates. Okay. Now, during his time, art and literature was replaced by philosophy and oratory. Now, when Plato was, the time when Plato lived, at that point of time, art and literature, it was replaced by philosophy and oratory. So before the age of Plato, art and literature existed. But after that, it got replaced by philosophy and oratory. Philosophers at that time discussed many matters of concern to the citizen and the state and applied the test of reason to each. Now, during that time, during the time when Plato lived, the philosophers used to talk about a lot of things. They discussed many things, and um, what they would actually discuss was that what are the things that are of concern to the citizen and are of the concern to the state. And then they applied this test of reason to everything that was there, literature or anything, the art. And Socrates was the head of all of them. Socrates would actually question, when at that time questioning was considered to be threatening actually. Nobody would question a lot. But Socrates used to question a lot. He used to question each and everything. And it is also known that Socrates was actually put to death because of this practice. He had questioned some of the things and he met his fate. And his quest for truth challenged many established beliefs and conventions. All right. The value of literature to society was also one of concerns that came forth. Now, when all the philosophers were questioning everything, they started questioning each and everything, and they would ask, what would they question? They would ask that, is it reasonable? Is it profitable to the society? Is it profitable to the citizens? So this is what they used to ask. And this practice also came to literature. They also started questioning literature. So the value of literature to society was also the concern that came forth. Although the previous age was one of creative activity, the 4th century BC was the age of critical inquiry and analysis. Now, as I told you that the previous age in which Plato lived, before the age before that, that was age of creative activity. Creative activity actually was there, art was there, literature was there. But in the 4th century, when Plato came, that age became the age of critical inquiry and analysis. Everything started to be analyzed, everything started to be questioned. So this is what started happening in the age of Plato. Okay, this is the slide. I hope this slide is clear. There's nothing much in it. It's just a brief introduction to the age of Plato, that Plato was the disciple of Socrates, and how Socrates used to question everything. Right? Let's move ahead. Now, major work, the important work of Plato was Republic. This is what we are actually going to study. Republic is actually in the form of dialogues. It is not like the work that we study now, like a novel or something. It is in the form of dialogues. And how is it in the form of dialogue? It is called dialogues because each question that Plato was interested in is discussed in the book in the form of question and answer. So everything that Plato was interested in, everything that might have come in the mind of Plato is actually discussed in this work, and it is in the form of question and answers. And uh, there are many interlocutors now who, if there are question and answers in the book, there has to be somebody who is questioning, there has to be somebody who's answering, right? So there are many interlocutors in it, and the chief of them is Socrates. So Socrates is actually there in the book. He features in the book. And in the book, it is Socrates that speaks the profound truths that form the philosophical system of Plato. So in the book, as in the real sense, when Socrates was there, Socrates used to speak profound truth. Even in the book, Socrates speaks the profound truth, is the one. Socrates is a character in the book, and he speaks the profound truth, and it forms the philosophical system of Plato. Okay? Then, um, his view of art. How did he actually view art? What were his views on poetry? What were his other views? Let us look at that. He gave this theory of ideas. If you get a question like that, who gave the theory of ideas? It was Plato. Okay, so he gave this theory of ideas, and what did he actually say about ideas? He said that ideas are the ultimate reality. Everything that exists in this world, he says, is not real. It's once removed from the reality, he says. He says that anything that you think, the first it comes to your mind, right? All the thoughts, all the ideas, it comes to your mind first. So ideas are real. And then after it comes to your mind, after that you perform an action on it. So whatever you do is once removed from the reality. Let us take an example. You see a tree outside, right? A tree is there, it's nature. You will say that, okay, this tree is real. But Plato says, no, it is not real. It is once removed from the reality. Why? Because if it was God who created the world, then the idea of the world came first. So idea is reality, and after that the idea was executed and the world was actually made. So it is once removed from the reality. So just like a tree, there was an idea of the tree that came first, and after that the tree exists. So idea is real, and the tree that exists is once removed from the reality. This was his theory of ideas. So he says actual things are just a copy of ideas. Whatever concrete exists in the world, it was an idea first, and then it was made. Therefore ideas are original and things itself are copy. अब अगर ऐसा है that he is calling the world itself the first copy, so what does it leave the artists to? What does an artist do now? A tree already exists, right? Let's talk about a painter. So what does a painter do? A painter a painter would actually paint an image, let's say, of a tree. Okay, so what a painter is doing, a tree that already exists, he's copying that down to his sheet. Now the original was the idea. The tree that actually exists is once removed from the reality, but now what the painter is actually doing is a copy of a copy. So it is twice removed from the reality. Correct. So the things that exist is once removed from the reality, and what an artist is doing is a copy further. So it is twice removed from the reality. He says that. Let's move ahead. Yeah. So literature, art, paintings, all of these produce what already exists in the world as mere pastime. So they are copies of a copy, twice removed from reality. They take men away from reality rather than towards it. So Plato says that the artists, the everything, every form of literature and art and painting, all these things, because they are twice removed from the reality, they do not take men towards reality, they take them more away from reality. These productions neither help to mold character nor to promote well-being of the state. So Plato says that they are of no use actually. He says that it does not even mold a character and nor does it promote the well-being of a state. Therefore, he says that it is of no use. This was his view on art. Next topic is his attack on poetry. After that, he started attacking the poetry. Now, he judged everything by the twin standards that we talked about, that how something will be good for an individual and then how something will be good for a state. So everything he judged by these standards. So even poetry he judged from these standards. So judging by these standards, he found in poetry more to condemn than to approve. So he says that he couldn't find anything to approve poetry, and there was a lot to condemn in it. What are the grounds of condemnation? The first thing he says, it is twice removed from the reality. First attack was that he says it is twice removed from reality. And then some other grounds. Second, he says poetic inspiration. Let's see what poetic inspiration says. He says that a poet writes not after thinking for a long time, but after being inspired. Now, if you write poetry, if any of you write poetry, what happens exactly? Let's say if I'm a writer, I write poetry, I'm sitting and suddenly I see something and it inspires me. I think that I can write on this incident, something happens and all of that sudden I get this muse and I feel that I want to write on this. This is what happens actually with poets. So Plato says that a poet does not think for a very long time. Let's say a poet would not be thinking for a year to write on some topic. It is just inspiration right there and right then. A poet gets inspired and he or she just writes the poetry down. So he says that such kind of sudden outburst cannot be reliable. You know, a poet writes just suddenly, and he says he's not even putting a lot of thought into it. A poet is just writing. So such kind of sudden outburst cannot be reliable for truth based on reason. A poet cannot be reasonable, he says. Therefore, poetry cannot take place of philosophy. He compares philosophy and poetry and he says that poetry cannot take place of philosophy. So he keeps philosophy above poetry. Now, uh, you know, there's a paradox here. Plato was also known to be a poet actually. Not that he wrote poetry, but he wrote in such a manner that he would write in a language, a very poetic language. So many of the other critiques have actually said about Plato that he has condemned poetry, but he himself is one of the greatest poets. That is a paradox. Let's move ahead. So he said that there cannot be any poets in the Republic unless they happen to be those who composed hymns to the gods and panegyrics on famous men. So what he said is, because of the sudden outbursts that the poets do and because they're not reliable, he says that he cannot allow poets to be in the Republic, and only those poets can be in the Republic, those who compose hymns to the gods and basically write elegies on famous men who would actually be useful to the people. So these were the two attacks. First was that it is twice removed from the reality, and second was the inspiration, that how poets get inspired in the moment of a time. The third is emotional appeal of poetry. So Plato says that poetry appeals to the emotions of human beings, and it appeals to the heart. And he said that poetry doesn't appeal to reason, and it does not appeal to the intellect. Let's see. He says that poetry is a product of inspiration, just like we talked in the second point, that poets gets inspired whenever the muse comes. They get inspired and they write the poetry down. So just like that, it appeals to the emotions rather than reason. Even emotions are actually a moment, an impulse of a moment. एक किसी point of time पे you get emotional, and it is not that you remain like that for the entire day, let's say. Therefore, even emotion is an impulse of the moment, just like poetic inspiration. And therefore, he says it cannot be reliable. He gives the example of tragic poetry. Now, taking up the tragic poetry, uh, now you must have seen or you must have read tragedies. What do tragedies have? They have sufferings, suffering of a particular person. Let's say the protagonist, and when we watch it, what happens to us? We feel pity. Emotions arouse हो जाते हैं, and we think that why such and such thing is happening to the person or the uh, hero or the heroine, whoever the tragedy is happening to. So we have those emotions. So Plato says that such emotions are not good for the health of a human being. Such emotions are unhealthy. This is a very famous quote by Plato. He says, if we let our own sense of pity grow strong by feeding upon the griefs of others, it is not easy to restrain it in the case of our own sufferings. What does that mean? He says, if we let our own sense of pity grow strong by feeding upon the grief of others. Now, when you are watching or reading a tragedy, you have arousal of feelings of like pity, fear, maybe sometimes. So he says, when such feelings grow strong, by especially by looking at the griefs of other people, then it is not easy to restrain it in the case of our own sufferings. Then when you are going to actually have those sufferings, those feelings, you will not be able to restrain those feelings. So therefore, so he says, poetry feeds and waters the passions instead of drying them up. So according to Plato, these feelings, they should be dried down. They should not be, they should not come forth. But he says that poetry, instead of, drying these emotions down, poetry feeds and waters these passions and they come out. Alright, so next attack on poetry is its non-moral character. Now Plato says that poetry also has a non-moral character. How? He says poetry poetry treats virtue and vice indifferently. अब प्लेटो कहता है कि पोएट्री में अच्छा और बुरा के बीच कोई फर्क नहीं दिखाते हैं. It's all the same, he says. How? Sometimes you must have seen, in fact many times, typical, if you look up any kind of a टीवी सीरीज, लेट्स से, ठीक है, हिंदी टीवी सीरीज अगर हम देखते हैं, अभी का एग्जांपल लेते हैं, तो क्या होता है, व्हाट हैपेंस इन दैट सीरियल, whoever is wise, whoever is virtuous person, जो भी अच्छा इंसान है, he or she would always be in grief. He or she would always keep feeling sad because of the things happening to that person. Whereas on the other hand, जो भी villain होता है या होती है, वो मजे में एकदम खुश रहते हैं. How they keep on doing those some stupid tricks, and they keep winning, and they keep giving pain to the good people in that. And it is only at the end that the virtuous people finally are happy and the wise gets punishment. right? This is what happens. So Plato says that often in literature, virtue comes to grief. जो भी virtue होता है वो sad रहता है. This gives an impression that most evil livers are happy and many good men are unhappy. तो ये क्या एक impression देता है कि जो भी अच्छे लोग हैं वो usually sad रहते हैं और जो भी बुरे हैं they are happy usually. Such literature, he says, corrupts both men and state. तो जो भी उसका judgment का standards था, it defies those standards because it corrupts men and state. All right, let's move ahead. So you remember now the 4 attacks. First was it is twice removed from the reality. Second was the inspiration, that it is the poet gets inspiration in the moment and then he or she writes the poem. Third, emotional appeal to the poetry, that it is very emotional, and he talks about tragic poetry, and then finally he talks about the non-moral character. Okay. Next is, what does he talk about the function of poetry? He says that although poetry pleases, but mere pleasure cannot be its object. Art cannot be divorced from morals. Pleasure, even of the highest rank, ranks low in Plato's scale of values. He says that a poet is a good artist only if he's a good teacher. ठीक है, तो प्लेटो कहते हैं कि yes, it is right that poetry pleases us, correct, but he says that that is it. Poetry doesn't do anything more than pleasing. He says that pleasure cannot be the sole thing that would help society or an individual in a particular way. So he says that a good poet can only be a good poet if he or she is a good teacher. Then his comments on drama. All the observations made by Plato applies equally to dramatic writing, which formed a branch of poetry. Now please remember, जो भी हमने बात की, we've been saying poetry, 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 but it does not apply only to the poetry actually. Poetry, they've used it as a common word for literature. जो ड्रामा को भी सेम चीजें अप्लाई होती हैं, ठीक है? कौन सी चीजें? It also has emotional appeal. It is also unconcerned with the morality. And then he made some more observations on drama. First, its appeal to baser instincts. How? पहले तो उन्होंने ड्रामा को सेम चीजें बताई, जो भी पोइट्री में है वो सब सेम ड्रामा को भी अप्लाई होता है. Then he went on to talk about more observations. Typically for drama, he said that it appeals to baser instincts. How? Now you see, drama is staged unlike poetry. Poetry को stage नहीं किया जाता, drama को act किया जाता है. So to make it more pleasing, dramatists often add quarrels or lamentations in tragedy and imitation of thunder and cries of beast in comedy. तो एक ड्रामा को more appealing बनाने के लिए, so that more people come and watch it, what happens in a drama, dramatists जो बनाते हैं, they often add quarrels in tragedy. ठीक है, बहुत, there are many tricks, there are many fights, endless, there are murders, etc. in a tragedy, and imitation of thunder and cries of beast in comedy. So when we have a comedy, you might hear some various sounds in the background. So all these arouse baser instincts in them, leading to bad taste and laxity in discipline. So what happens when a reader or a viewer watches such stuff? It leads them to have a bad taste and also laxity in discipline. This is first observation that Plato makes on drama. Next is effects of impersonation. Even the actors are affected. He says it's not only the readers or the viewers who are affected by such stuff, it's also the actors. How? Now actors are playing those roles, right? So if an actor is playing a role of, let's say, a wise, a bad and a evil person, so what happens? Plato says that some of the qualities are inherited by repeatedly playing that role, somewhere or the other, those qualities are inherited by the actors. So this is how actors are also affected. By keep playing the evil roles like cowards, knaves, criminals, they let these evil qualities enter into their nature. Those tragedies that represent the best and noblest in life are positive benefit to the community and deserves to be encouraged. So he says, only those tragedies uh, who have some positiveness to it, let's say people playing virtuous roles of brave people, of legends, such tragedies can still be taken into consideration because they would benefit the community, and those deserves to be encouraged. Okay? Next he says tragic and comic pleasure. Now he says, he puts a question and he says, why is it so that when there is a painful scene, in a movie, let's say, or in a drama, or anything, when you're reading a play, why does it arouse pleasure? Why? What is it in the painful scene that causes pleasure? Now you see, whenever you are watching a painful scene, you might start crying. It is also a form of pleasure. You might feel anger. That is also. So he says, why is it that this happens? Well, we don't have an answer to that. Even still, psychologists are still looking into that. But Plato says that human nature is a mixture of heterogeneous feelings. Yes, that's true. We have a lot of feelings that are in, like, in human nature, like anger, fear, envy, grief, etc., which are painful by themselves, but afford pleasure when indulged in excess. We have all those feelings, but they are somewhere inside the head and it doesn't come out. But when we watch something like that, or when we read something like that, those feelings get indulged in excess, and Plato says it is not good for human health. It pleases a man to lose his temper. Now you see, कभी कभी बहुत गुस्सा आता है, तो what do? Sometimes you might pick up something and throw it, or you might just break something, or you might just shout to the, like, loudest. You might just shout on the top of your voice, and that gives you pleasure. After that, you feel relieved that nikal gaya sab, right? So it pleases a man to lose his temper or to go on weeping. कई बार हम रोते हैं तो रोते ही रहते हैं, बोलते हैं अब हल्का हो गया. So that is how a man, a person, feels pleasure by losing his temper or by going on weeping. In comedy, he says, pleasure takes form of laughter. अब comedy में क्या होता है? You have different scenes. You might have a scene where, uh, let's say, a coward person starts behaving like a brave person, and you'll laugh at that. If you think very wisely, there's nothing to laugh at that point of view. At that point where a person is trying to actually be good, but you laugh at that scene. Where pity should be involved, you laugh at that scene. That is what comedy does. So he says that in comedy, pleasure takes form of laughter when we see something on the stage like a coward behaving like a brave man, a cheat behaving like an honest man, and so on and so forth. Such pleasure is malicious, he says. It is not good, and it arises from the weakness of a person. ठीक है? So these are the thoughts of Plato on poetry. So finally, in book 10 of Republic, you might even get the question. Sometimes we get questions like, in which book does Plato banishes the poets from Republic? So it is book 10. So book 10 of Republic, he states that poets should be banished from the ideal state. All right. So I hope that this is clear to you, and please come back for the next lesson, which are also going to be very important. And then we'll have a video lesson where we'll have some of the question series on the topics that we have covered till now. and keep watching, keep going to the blogs and keep reading those blogs. They're very important. We've made different sections. You can drop down from the menu and you can see in the learning section we have bifurcated different topics like literary theory, literary criticism, history, literary terms, and some recent topics that are important. So we have bifurcated all those, and you can go on and look at those blogs and read them, and keep watching the videos too. Thank you very much, and keep visiting the site. It's onlineenglishhub.org. Thank you.